30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drift into the right a little. 20, down a half. 30 seconds forward. We copy you down, Eagle. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In July 1969, Neil Armstrong became the first human to step onto the surface of the moon. Neil was also an aerospace engineer, naval aviator, and test pilot. Neil was among the first of many brave explorers to follow in his footsteps during the Apollo space program era. The Apollo program was the third human spaceflight program carried out by NASA, the United States civilian space agency. First conceived during the presidency of Dwight D. Eisenhower as a 3-man spacecraft program, Apollo was later dedicated to President John F. Kennedy's national goal of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth by the end of the 1960s. A total of 12 men have landed on the moon. This was accomplished with 2 U.S. pilot astronauts flying a lunar module on each of the 6 NASA missions across a 41-month time span starting July 20th, 1969 with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on Apollo 11 and ending December 14th, 1972 with Gene Cernan and Jack Schmitt on Apollo 17, with Cernan being the last to step off the lunar surface. Hi, I'm David Bankston, host of Dave Travels. Today I have been invited to NASA to cover the launch of the SpaceX rocket to the U.S. Space Station at Kennedy Space Center, Florida. While most visitors only get to see the museum and the public areas, I've been granted special press access to the secure launch areas. One of the buildings I've always wanted to visit is this famous vehicle assembly building. The Vehicle Assembly Building was created in the late 60s to assemble the entire Saturn V rocket vertically. That's why it needed to be so huge. The structure is 716 feet long by 518 feet wide and 526 feet tall. That's an amazing 129 million cubic feet of space between those walls. By volume, it's one of the largest buildings in the world. It's so vast that it has, in fact, its own weather system with clouds on the top levels on humid days. After I cleared security, I made my way past some very famous buildings, including the CBS building where Walter Cronkite broadcast the very first landing on the moon. In the NASA press room, anticipation was building as we waited for launch. I got to meet the director of the Kennedy Space Center, former astronaut Robert Cabana. Next to the press room, I stumbled across some critical space items. Look at these. Cargo headed for space. After the Apollo era concluded in 1972, NASA set its sights on an even bigger space program called the Space Shuttle, or the STS program. NASA's Space Shuttle program was the United States government's manned launch vehicle program from 1981 to 2011. This winged space shuttle orbiter was launched vertically, usually carrying between 4 and 7 astronauts and up to 50,000 pounds of payload into low Earth orbit, or LEO. When its mission was complete, the shuttle could move itself out of orbit and actually return to Earth and land using an unpowered approach, descent, and landing. It would land kind of like a glider, worked like a charm. The shuttle program is now retired, but Launch Pad 39A will live on to be retooled and reused for new launch missions. What's next for NASA?
What we're trying to do is put together a plan to get humans in the Martian environment sometime between 2030 and 2039.
That's right, Mars. NASA actually has 3 active rovers on Mars. The Spirit and Opportunity rovers have been exploring Mars since 2004. Curiosity, the largest and most advanced spacecraft ever sent to another planet, landed on Mars August 6, 2012. Beneath the crust surface, as revealed in the scoop trowels and the piles of sediment on the right side of each, is finer sand, which is darker brown as compared to the dust on the surface. The left end of the trowel wall shows alternating light and dark bands, indicating that the sand inside the drift is not completely uniform. Strong evidence there was once water on Mars. Back on Earth, I was getting ready for the launch. My press access enabled me to get pretty close to the launch. The launch was going to take place at Launch Complex 40. The rocket to be launched was created by a California company called SpaceX and was shipped and reassembled across country to NASA in Florida. I got there early enough to see the rocket being moved into position. This process took over 25 minutes to stand up. I've sped it up so you can see it here. At the very top of the rocket sits the most critical and important part, the capsule containing the supplies for the space station. I was in luck, and somehow I was selected to be included in the 25 journalists to be allowed to go to the top of the VAB building to film the launch. This is a rare privilege and usually restricted only to those largest press organizations. After the Apollo program ended, the VAB building was remodeled to accommodate the space shuttle. NASA is now modernizing this building again with new structures and systems designed to work with their next generation space vehicles. Once on the roof, we quickly moved over to the edge and started setup for launch.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Once in space, the remotely controlled unmanned capsule went about its mission and was shortly docked at the International Space Station. Happy astronauts cracked the hatch and retrieved their much-needed supplies. With its mission now accomplished, the capsule disconnected from the space station and headed back down to Earth for splashdown. The capsule was collected and will be reused in future missions. The mission ended with a complete success, and so does this episode of Day Travels. I will be back soon with another travel adventure, so be sure to like us on Facebook, subscribe on Vimeo or YouTube, and we'll see you soon. Cheers!